Star Wars. Huh. That was lighter than usual. At this rate, we might become a tolerable fan base by the 22nd century.
I knew love was blind, but I didn't know it was stupid, too.
I'll leave the lengthy diatribe about growing up on the prequels and loving the glut of tie-in media we got around that time for my overly long video on Knights of the Old Republic, and just reiterate my frustration at the comparative lack of Star Wars video games today. Yeah, my man crush on Cameron Monaghan is still going strong thanks to the Jedi games, but getting to play as the world's most talented ginger just isn't enough to satisfy my deep carnal lust for the Star Wars universe. Oh yeah, show me those cross-sections, you dirty minx. But that's where our old friend the Remaster comes in. Yes sir, thanks to Asypr, what's old is new again, and please forgive us for how the Battlefront remasters turned out. We promise this one isn't a broken mess. And to my pleasant surprise, they were telling the truth. Not only did Asypr bring us a properly functional remaster of one of the most adequate Star Wars games of the 6th generation, but then they went ahead and fixed it up into a game I actually have fun playing now. So without any further ado, this is Star Wars Bounty Hunter. I cannot begin to explain to you how psyched I was for this game as a kid. The bounty hunters of Star Wars have been a source of fascination for me ever since I first saw Vader recruit IG-88, Bob Fett, and the other clowns I forget the names of in Empire.
I'm the disintegration machine. Want a guy disintegrated? Get me integrated. That's Dengar's motto.
Couple that with Jango Fett being far and away my favorite character introduced in Attack of the Clones, and the idea of finally getting to hunt bounties myself made Bounty Hunter one of the games I was the most excited for that whole year. Sure, the previous year's Star Wars Obi-Wan focused on my absolute favorite character of the whole franchise, and that was the drizzling shits to me. But what were the odds that I'd be frustrated and disappointed 2 years in a row?
My warning diode is pulsating.
Given that we're closing in on 23 years and at least one concussion since I first played it, you'll have to forgive me for being fuzzy on the exact reason I hated it so much. I know I recall hating the aiming mechanics, but I was so god-awful at playing shooters on console back then that it's entirely possible I hated it simply because the controls were inverted, which is an unforgivable evil in any game, though hardly an uncommon issue at the time. I suppose I could have done this as an original versus remaster video using my original copy of Bounty Hunter.
If I had one!
So yeah, I'll do my best to point out the stuff that I'm sure is new to this version. Just expect me to miss some nuances here and there. You know, just like the rest of my videos. Set several years prior to Episode 2, Bounty Hunter puts you in the armor of Jango Fett, objectively the cooler Fett by virtue of actually doing something on screen before meeting an embarrassing end, as he takes part in a hunt for the fallen Jedi Komari Vosa. Vosa's dark side cult, the Bando Gora, are utilizing a new variant of death sticks even more addictive and dangerous than usual to create an army of mindless followers. Their evil plan has been successful enough for Darth Sidious to consider them a threat to his own evil plans, so he orders his apprentice and Vosa's old master, Count Dooku, yes, Darth Tyrannus. It's more fun to say Count Dooku, sue me. He orders Dooku to take care of Vosa and the Bando Gora before things get out of hand. Being all too classically villainous to handle the matter himself, Dooku opts to contact several of the galaxy's most dangerous bounty hunters with an offer of 5 million credits in exchange for the head of Komari Vosa.
5 million? Wow, that could make you for life.
Never one to say no to a good payday, Jango jumps at the chance for the score of a lifetime. But he isn't the only one eager to claim the prize. An old figure from his past is after Vosa's bounty as well, and is more than happy to put Jango himself down at no extra charge.
It's been a long time, Jango.
In terms of gameplay, Bounty Hunter comes to us from the awkward adolescence of dual thumbsticks on controllers. While they had become standard for all controllers on the console still standing at this point in the generation, developers hadn't entirely nailed down what they wanted that second stick to do or how exactly to implement it.
What is going on? What are these, inverted controls? Who even uses... Ah, got it! Damn it!
So while we've more or less standardized how third-person shooters operate these days, Bounty Hunter implements a strange hybrid of lock-on shooting and free aim where neither feel quite as good as they could have had LucasArts simply picked a lane and stuck to it. Lock-on is frustratingly sticky and focuses on where Jango himself is facing instead of where the camera is looking. Thanks to muscle memory on my part, this led to multiple instances of trying to lock onto an enemy while running away, only to instead flip the camera around behind Jango. And with how hard this game gets by the end, that half second of disorientation can be enough for you to wind up dead. Free aim doesn't feel much better, as this is prior to decent aim assist, making it possible for us mouse and keyboard purists to be able to aim with thumbsticks. Meaning that I saved using free aim for moments where I was too far away for lock-on to work and nothing else. There was also a weird quirk when aiming the sniper rifle where it would drift to the right as I zoomed in. I don't think it was my controller this time. At the very least, it's never mistaken a press of the right shoulder button for moving the right stick before. Outside of those issues, Bounty Hunter controls fine. Something I don't recall being the case with the original at all, so credit to Asypr for sharpening up the responsiveness as best they could. Though again, I would like to emphasize that my memory is fuzzy on the details of what I disliked so much about Bounty Hunter as a kid, so those of you who enjoyed it back in the day can put an asterisk next to that statement. I also found the combat itself quite enjoyable once I adjusted for the quirks. Having to utilize Django's mobility to dodge and jetpack my way out of enemy fire while employing the tried and true combat tactics of Frank Reynolds
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
feels surprisingly ahead of its time. Back then, the only games with a decent sense of mobility alongside the shooty bang bang were platformers like Ratchet and Clank, not dedicated third-person shooters. Speaking of platformers, similar to the early Tomb Raiders and Lara's Infinipistols, you'll spend a large portion of Bounty Hunter relying on Django's Infiniblasters. Which is fine by me, because I think they're fucking badass, and in fact, I still have the toy version sitting in a box somewhere. Oh, they've got a solid damage output and rate of fire as well, but effectiveness and gameplay pales in comparison to their cool factor. Django was the original Mandalorian cowboy long before Din Djarin was a twinkle in Dave Filoni's eye. At some point, however, the blasters aren't going to cut the mustard. They also won't be enough against some tough enemies. That's when you'll have to dig through your weapon wheel, in addition to the remaster, which totally didn't take me until the second to last level to notice, and bring out the big guns. For starters, we have two different types of limited ammo rapid-fire rifles that you can find on some levels. But whether you're using the blaster rifle or its big brother, the heavy gun, these two wind up in the same spot of being saved for the toughest enemies due to non-existent ammo pickups for them. Outside of the rare instance of finding a second one later in the level, that 99 count is all you're getting. Eventually, I gave up on trying to find a balanced approach with these guns and started saving them for boss battles only. Then we have the sniper rifle. Pretty self-explanatory, and unless Bounty Hunter is feeling particularly random at the moment, it's usually a one-hit kill. Plus, you can actually find rounds for this one strewn about the levels. The only downsides are the low max ammo count, and that you only have access to it in a select few levels in the latter half of the game. Moving on to the high explosives, we've got the classic Star Wars standby of thermal detonators, as well as two varieties of rockets that Django can fire from his jetpack. Just don't ask how he reloads it mid-combat. Thanks to the Dark Forces series, thermal detonators are one of my favorite grenade variants in gaming, only being beaten out by the dynamite from Blood. So you can imagine my disappointment when I realized how difficult it is to hit an enemy with one of them in Bounty Hunter. Regardless of who you're locked onto, Django always seems to aim it towards the closest enemy he's facing. On top of that, building up power for a longer throw is so slow that you could have easily dispatched an enemy or two with the blasters in the time it takes to throw a detonator and wait for it to explode. If you do manage to hit a crowd of enemies with one, you'll deal a ton of damage, of course. The struggle is in actually hitting them with one. The rockets are better purely by virtue of not needing a charge-up time to go further than 2 feet in front of Django. Then the game decides to go even further beyond and lets you guide their path mid-flight in free aim. Catching a distant group of enemies unawares with a single rocket never fails to be satisfying. If you're up for some overkill, you can also switch to the cluster rockets. Controlling the same as a basic rocket, cluster rockets split in mid-air before converging back on your target for 3 times the explosive power. Why not just put all that payload into a single rocket, you ask? Because, as Macross, or Robotech, teaches us, the coolness of a missile or rocket is exponentially increased the more are on screen at any given time. Finally, we have a pair of wrist-mounted weapons, the Saber Dart and the Flamethrower. The Saber Dart is a rare one-hit kill weapon best saved for emergencies like with the damn Nexus on Malastare. It's also the thing Django uses to kill Zam Wesell in Episode 2. You know, the dart which is the clue that leads Obi-Wan to Kamino specifically because it's identified as a Kamino in design. The planet Django is based on due to being the genetic donor for the cloning project that has yet to begin when this game is set. I mean, I guess they could be a different variant. Wait, why am I questioning the continuity of a game that was dubiously canon even before the original EU got axed?
There is no f***ing point. There's never any f***ing point.
Continuity hiccups aside, another drawback to the Saber Dart besides its scarcity is the moment Django needs to stand still before firing. So make sure you don't time it wrong when using one against a Nexu. Otherwise, you'll be down a life faster than you can say, why the fuck did they make these things the strongest enemies in the whole fucking game?
Don't question our system of justice, my little pinko friend.
As for the flamethrower, look, I think we can all agree that video game flamethrowers tend to suck. I mean, it's literally a page on TV tropes. And because of that, I initially disregarded Bounty Hunter's flamethrower once I saw its short range. That is, until I realized I needed at least some footage of it for the video and learned that this is, without question, the most OP weapon in the entire game. Yes, it has about as much reach as my social media presence, but that hardly matters when 2/3 of the game takes place in close quarters and the idiotic enemy AI likes to conga line straight towards you. Oh, and the most important part? All the stream of flame has to do is lightly touch an enemy to completely immolate them. It doesn't matter how much health they have. The second any humanoid enemy catches fire, it burns until they're dead. This is completely broken and I love it. Maybe I would feel bad about exploiting the game like this were Bounty Hunter not so unexpectedly brutal for a game from the early 2000s that isn't named Maximo.
Okay, we're gonna start you off with a simple bench press.
How's it work?
You lay on this bench, and I drop this giant boulder on you. If you can move it, you'll be stronger! Yeah!
Enemies will swarm you from all directions, including where you just came from. A design choice which has always been a pet peeve of mine. It's simply a cheap way to knock the player's health down and almost always makes zero sense spatially, as there's nowhere they could have been hiding that makes any amount of sense. I'm of the opinion that when playing on a game's default difficulty, you should only be dying frequently due to either a lack of skill or a failure to understand mechanics that were properly taught to you. Using tricks like this to overwhelm and intentionally kill a first-time player should be exclusively reserved for harder difficulties. Granted, I've never managed to find a game that's managed to pull this off perfectly, and there are exceptions that were built with a completely different design philosophy, like most FromSoft titles.
I'm in danger!
But this is the baseline I prefer to use when judging the difficulty of the typical video game. Looking at it from that perspective, Bounty Hunter isn't interested at all in being a fair challenge. It just wants to make you waste your extra lives. Why exactly a shooter from 2002 employs a lives system I'll never understand. Especially not when it also uses checkpoints. It seems like you would use one or the other, not both. Choosing to implement a limited number of lives makes even less sense when it's a flat setting of 5 lives per level. There's no way to earn more, and they reset back to 5 upon reaching the next level. And since enemies don't respawn or even heal when you die, you can use what should be a punishment to your advantage. It's weird, is basically what I'm trying to say. To add an extra layer of difficulty to an already difficult game, you can keep an eye out for optional bounties as well. Using the scanning feature of Django's visor, you can check NPCs for any outstanding bounties on their heads. If they do, you'll see a bunch of extra neat little details about them. But since this will almost always take place mid-firefight, all you really need to keep an eye out for is whether they're worth more alive or dead. Once you know that, you press the fire button to tag them on your HUD. The bounty won't count if you don't do this while they're still alive. Then either gun them down or wrap them up with a snare cable. From there, all you need to do is approach them and press the interact button to confirm the bounty. Now, what does earning extra credits by hunting these optional bounties get you? In the original version?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
I know, right? You'd think that you'd be able to use it for upgrades or something, but no. It's just there for bragging rights. The remaster does rectify this somewhat by having some of the additional bonus content unlocked by having accrued enough in bounty money, though it isn't quite enough to keep the optional bounties from feeling like a wasted opportunity. If only there was another shooter about bounty hunting from the same console generation to contrast this. Man, I would give my left nut for a Star Wars game that played like Stranger's Wrath. And my right one for a Stranger's Wrath too. Or my middle nut if it got me both. And with the mental image of a 3-balled swan now burned into your brain, let's move on to the presentation. Visually, I think Bounty Hunter looks fine for a game from 2002, and while I wouldn't exactly say the remaster makes it look brand new, its HD coat of paint is appreciated. But like most Star Wars games, the strength of its presentation comes from the distinct aesthetic of the franchise and its trademark excellent sound design. Though of course I don't dare risk playing most of the John Williams music used in Bounty Hunter's soundtrack for obvious reasons. Now, Knights of the Old Republic and a lot of other games, composer Jeremy Soule also gets credited here, but since there's a lot more of John Williams' musical motifs present in Bounty Hunter than in KOTOR, I'm not taking the chance. Which is also why I chose to use the music from Outcast in the background of this video. Wrong Outcast. Though kudos on not just using Heya, future me. What I can talk more about is Bounty Hunter's voice acting. With Tamura Morrison reprising his role as Django,
Release him, now! As you wish. No, wait!
it's already one of the more authentic Star Wars games from this time period. You reach a certain point where you're so used to James Arnold Taylor filling in as Obi-Wan that it's Ewan McGregor who stops sounding right. To his credit, Tamura Morrison puts a lot more effort into matching his performance from the film than you'd expect a screen actor to give for a video game in the early 2000s.
I wouldn't be surprised if you ran into Montrose on this hunt.
I'd be surprised if I didn't.
However, to counterbalance the lead giving a good performance, we have Leanna Walsman reprising her role as Zam and putting in the exact amount of effort I'd expect a screen actor to give for a video game in the early 2000s.
Don't leave me here, Django. Gardula wants to feed me to her crate dragon.
I'll be back. Trust me.
Trust you? I know what you're doing. You're gonna go after Vosa alone, aren't you? I thought we were partners, Fett.
The remainder of the cast are comprised mostly of veteran voice actors like Lucille Bliss as Django's Toydarian mission control Rosada.
Good grief, Django. A senator. Oh, you'll have a price on your own head soon.
Corey Burton breaking out his tried and true Christopher Lee impression as Count Dooku.
As you wish. And what of your plan for the clone army?
Captain Quark himself, the sorely missed Jim Ward, as your first bounty Miko Ginty.
You want me? You gotta go through him first!
Clancy Brown in full ham mode as Django's rival Montrose.
You didn't deserve the privilege of command. After I left, you're the one who led the Mandalorians to their deaths.
We were betrayed.
To the Jedi. So I heard. Too bad I wasn't there to see it.
And what kind of 2000s era Star Wars game would this be without Greg Berger, Tom Kane, and Kevin Michael Richardson as various minor characters? A bad one, that's what. Lastly, there's Tamara Phillips as Komari Vosa, and for someone with such a threadbare IMDb profile, I have to say she did a great job with the limited screen time Vosa is given despite ostensibly being the primary antagonist.
It is time that the hunters become the hunted. Kill them. Kill them now. Bring me their bodies.
It makes me wonder why she stopped working not long after this, when between here with Vosa and a year later with Euthura Band in Knights of the Old Republic, she'd shown an excellent aptitude for portraying villains. I mean, the fact that all I had to do was see the name Euthura Band and instantly remembered who that side character was should tell you a lot about her performance. As a bonus, you can also unlock some animated outtakes. Though a few take that classic Pixar credit style of pretending the characters themselves are on a film set, the funniest ones are where they matched up Montrose to the actual riffing Clancy Brown did between takes.
This is gonna hurt you a lot more than me. Why in every game do we have that line? Come on. Come on!
I'm actually kind of glad that you have to complete the game before unlocking all of these, because seeing the contrast between the vicious son of a bitch Montrose is in the story, versus the older guy bemoaning that Lucas took too long on the prequels so he couldn't play Anakin like he wanted, makes it so much more amusing. And speaking of Montrose's role in it, let's talk about Bounty Hunter's story. Going in, I wasn't expecting much in the way of plot. There were a lot of Star Wars games coming out to tie into the prequels, and not nearly as much in the way of good stories to go around. Games set in other periods of Star Wars lore tended to fare better on this front, which leads me to suspect that the recency of the prequels and Lucas's tendency towards, we're doing this thing, figure out how to make it work in your story, made it easier to just go with the safe options when it came to writing a story for their next game. Never forget this is the same man that unilaterally decided to revive Darth Maul, then told Dave Filoni to figure out how to do it on his own, while also not letting the team making the Darth Maul game know any of this until they were halfway through prototyping their own explanation of how he came back. Remind me again how Disney giving the franchise back to old Georgie boy would instantly fix everything? With all this in mind, you can hopefully understand my initial skepticism towards Bounty Hunter's story. Skepticism I'm happy to say was misplaced. I mean, it's got nothing on either Knights of the Old Republic 1 or 2, but Bounty Hunter nevertheless possesses a solid narrative to anchor its gameplay. In fact, Django gets a sort of proto-Mandalorian Season 1 character arc, going from an avowed loner only concerned with the next bounty to slowly beginning to show signs of caring for others by the end. Though this silver-armored Mandalorian is a fair bit more amoral than Grogu's dad, what with Jango's willingness to gun down an army of Republic security forces just to reach one corrupt senator. Sure, that guy was corrupt as all hell and working with the Bando Gora, but I'm reasonably sure most of those security guards were average Joes working a 9 to 5.
This isn't what it looks like. They had mescaline in their balls. It was self-defense.
The narrative itself is a fairly straight line of investigating clues leading to the hidden moon Komari Vosa and the Bando Gora, which is a great band name, are based on. It's the strength of the character interactions that prop it up for me. Particularly Jango and Rosada's banter. Ra's often teasing Jango about settling down to the point that she starts sounding like a mom pressuring her son to get her some grandkids already.
Why don't you meet a nice girl, settle down, have a kid? You won't live forever, you know. Not in this business.
Not in this lifetime, Ross.
It's what makes... Whoops! Almost forgot to put up a spoiler warning. You should know the drill by now. Here be spoilers, there be time code for my conclusion. Their dynamic is what makes Raz's death at the hands of Montross near the end of the game hit that much harder. A Mandalorian exile responsible for the death of Jango's mentor Jaster Muriel, which can be seen in the unlockable Dark Horse comics and the bonus materials, Montross is a recurring thorn in your side throughout the game, but it's here that he signs his death warrant. Leading to probably one of the most brutal deaths in the whole series up to this point, as after one final boss fight with him, Jango leaves Montross to be torn apart and possibly cannibalized by the zombie-like Bando Gora grunts. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Also, this 11th hour turn for a gothic horror atmosphere on the Bando Gora's moon base is an unexpected but welcome shift. It almost feels like I stumbled upon a Star Wars version of Nosgoth. And now I'm thinking about how awesome of a crossover that would be. Shortly after feeding the Bando Gora some delicious ham, Jango gets a short stint as Vosa's prisoner / possible fuckboy, because this is Star Wars and the protagonist has to be captured by the villain at some point, though usually there's a lot less wildly out of place sexual tension. Fortunately, Jango is saved by Zam's timely arrival, and we head into the final boss battle. Okay, I'm gonna be honest and admit that I have no clue how to do this fight properly. I've got 2 blasters, she's got 2 lightsabers. Who do you think typically wins a fight like this? Exactly. So after a few good college tries at winning this fight legit, I decided to try the dumbest thing possible. Punching her. And it worked. Then I discovered that a couple punches apparently stagger Vosa enough for the snare cable to work on her. Not the most dignified or honorable way to fight the final boss, I admit, but last time I checked, she's the one with the evil magic and bullshit overpowered laser swords.
My powers are far beyond any of your barbarian weapons. This is where your hunt comes to an end.
I cast fist!
Before Jango can take her in alive, however, Dooku steps in to steal the kill, revealing that he was well aware of the location of Vosa's hideout and that the true purpose of this hunt was to find the best possible candidate for Kamino's cloning project. Seems like a roundabout way to achieve this, but if you had fun, Dookie, I had fun. Still thinking about Raz's encouragement to start his own family, Jango accepts on the condition that the first clone be made to age normally and given to him.
Might I inquire as to why?
You might.
And with everything settled, Jango and Zam head back to the ship to live happily ever after.
It was a bounty hunter called...
Oh, right. Kinda wonder why they had the 2 of them become buds by the end when Jango ices Zam without a second thought in episode 2. Contrary to what my own hazy memories told me to expect of Star Wars Bounty Hunter, I wound up finding a lot to like about this game. While those same hazy memories make it hard for me to say for sure what exactly were qualities my dumb child self failed to see at the time, and what was added by Aspyr's remaster, I can say for sure that I believe this release is worth checking out. Even if it's nowhere near a perfect game, Bounty Hunter's positives outweigh the negatives. The fun factor of the fast-paced combat makes up for the imbalanced arsenal and aiming quirks. The story is solid with more genuine character depth than a prequel to Attack of the Clones has any right to. The general presentation possesses LucasArts' typical high quality for Star Wars games. And really, until Disney execs pull their heads out of their asses and realize how cash money a Mandalorian game would be in the right hands, this is the closest we've got to the way. On the technical end, following the disaster that was the Battlefront remasters, Asypr has shown far greater quality control since, if this and the Tomb Raider remasters are anything to go by. Cheap plug for my 3 videos on those games here. The worst I encountered with Bounty Hunter was this amusing glitch showing that prisoners in the Star Wars universe all T-pose to assert dominance. But beyond that one cutscene, I didn't encounter any significant issues or crashing with the PC version I played for this video. If you're interested in getting this game for yourself, the remastered version of Bounty Hunter is available on PC, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S at $20. Personally, I would wait for a sale, but I'm also the guy who paid over $100 for a Dreamcast game. So you do you, boo. And that about does it for this one. Next time, we'll finally be finishing what I started all the way back in September of 2023, as we round out the mainline Suikoden titles with Suikoden 5. I'll see you then.
Hey, did you name that new ship of yours yet?
She's called
Rey Skywalker.